Welcome to the Eve Growing Concept. This is going to be a revealing video of how I make my vermenting bin. These are basically the parts you'll be using and creating, and this is what the fermenting bin looks like. Now, it's a 6-gallon bucket. I'll be rambling on as this video plays through, so it's going to be off the cuff as far as my voice goes here. This is the subfloor and the aeration tube. The aeration tube screws right onto the subfloor. There are no glues. This is the subfloor bracket that holds the subfloor up, and this is what it looks like on the inside of the fermenting bin. All the parts are movable. It's a very rugged container that should last many fermenting cycles. So these are basically the parts right here. Now on Etsy they have a vermiculture bucket that's very similar to this. It's not about the container you use. Fermenting is more about the process involved, and we'll talk more about that in upcoming videos. So these are basically your parts. You have your two elbows, your subfloor bracket, your subfloor with your aeration tube screwed onto there. Again, there's no glue used with this build. And there it is, folks. This is the fermenting container. These elbows keep the worms from getting out and keep them from clogging that half-inch conduit there. So that's what I've come up with so far. And again, I'm open sourcing this. If there's better ideas out there, then that's what this video is, to drum up some questions and come up with some other ideas. So that's what I've come up with so far, and we'll talk more about why that's important, that the worms don't block it. And for the drain, I have a TPVC that is used for the drain, which allows it to drain and aerate inside the bucket. And of course they stack, giving the vermiculturist many farms in a smaller location. And like I've said in other videos, do not buy buckets. There's tons of them being thrown away every day. These buckets, I had to just let them be incinerated because I can't get any more buckets. I have so many of them. And these buckets, as I've said, are far better than the ones you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. So let's get on with the build. It requires 2 buckets. You can make this with 1 bucket, and I will show you how to do that if there's an interest. But since I have so many buckets, I'm going to use 2. This first one here is the parts bucket. Now we're going to cut off the subfloor. Now I should have drilled a bunch of holes in the bottom of this bucket first, and because it is easier when the bucket is intact to drill these holes at the bottom, but for this build we'll just go with what we got here. So notice that I'm using my jigsaw as a marker to do about an inch floor, about an inch in size. So right around we cut it, and there you have your subfloor. Now the subfloor you take and you put it right inside the bucket all the way to the bottom, because we're going to make the subfloor bracket, the thing that holds, the part that holds the subfloor up about an inch off of the bottom of the bucket. So we're going to do the same thing. We cut a little slit in here so we can get our jigsaw in there. And when you do cut this, be very firm with that jigsaw. Do not let it get out of control, because it's very important that you just be very firm with that jigsaw. And always wear safety glasses, of course, because there are parts that could come out apart and poke in your eye or whatever. So always wear safety glasses. So again, we're doing the same thing. I'm using the jigsaw to mark the bottom of the bucket. So the excess lid, I use it as a cap for some of my other bins, my composting bin or my dog food bin, because it's easier to take it off and on than the caps. The caps I leave on my fermenting because I only open them every 6 to 8 weeks to get the worm castings out of it. So there you have your subfloor bracket that we just made. Now we're going to cut this about an inch off, because we're going to need this to fit around the bucket and leave room for the grommet and the half-inch conduit. So in the end, it'll look like this when we're done with it. When we put it inside the bucket before the subfloor goes on, it'll look like that. So then we're going to take the main bucket and we're going to drill 3 1-inch holes, into 1 in the bottom and 2 at the top. This is what it looks like at the bottom. I go as close as I can to the bucket, remembering that I'm going to have to put a grommet around there. And we drill 3 holes, and you clean these holes. The top holes I use the handle to measure where I'm going to drill them. So two, that you can get away with one, but I'll tell you why I do two. I just want to make sure that the aeration gets in there. And we'll talk more about that as the video goes on. Here's the grommets I was talking about. These are 3/4-inch grommets that go into a 1-inch hole to allow a 1/2-inch conduit to go in. I get these grommets on Amazon, and all the links will be below on where I get these parts. And they're difficult to get in. I love these things, and for eave growing, they're vital for many reasons. And we'll be talking a lot about those grommets. That I just love that part. They're invincible. You can reuse them, and they last for a very long time. Now here's the subfloor we're going to put holes in. As you can see, it's easier to drill these holes when the bucket is intact. But for this demonstration, I cut the bucket off, the lid off too soon. It still works. So I have a 1-inch hole that you'll be able to screw the aeration tube in, and then I drill a bunch of little holes. These holes are don't have to be precise. I usually drill it big enough for a full-size worm to get out of the bottom of the bin if he gets stuck in there. So that's basically my rule of thumb with that. And so the subfloor bracket goes in, and then your subfloor goes on top of that. And then you screw it in with your aeration tube. Now here's the concept with this whole thing. You got about a 1/4 inch of liquid that always remains at the bottom, and 1.5 inches of air between where the liquid is and where the subfloor fits. So the aeration comes through the bottom there and up through the container. And this is the internal aeration, and then it should come out through the sides and vice versa. So if there's a breeze, it should go right through the bucket. Is the concept here. So what else? All right, so I cut my conduit with a PVC cutter. I got this one on Amazon, but you can get these at Lowe's or Home Depot or any hardware store, and this one works fairly well. Next time I get one, I'll get a more rugged one. So the bottom drain conduit is about 3 inches long, and the two side ones are about 2 inches long. And those will go into these 3/4-inch grommets. Now, as you can see, I'm having a little bit of a difficulty pushing those through because I'm not using a grease, an olive oil or some kind of grease. I recommend you use that for sure, because it does indeed make it so much easier than trying to get them in there. Once they're in there, they're permanent and they're firm. I love those grommets. So anyways, let's recap here. We got a 3/4-inch grommet that we're using to a 1/2 inch conduit, and we're drilling a 1-inch hole. So that's basically what that container looks like. Now here, this might be a little bit of an overkill, but these Coke bottle tops fit perfectly on a 1/2 inch conduit. So these are parts that I have around because I use them for many different reasons. They hold the screen, they allow you to not use any glue. These things press onto the 1/2 inch conduit when you have a screen that, like we're going to show here. Here's the pipe screen that I use to keep fruit flies from getting in, and I have another one on the inside to keep the worms from getting out or clogging that 1/2 inch conduit. It's so important that we don't clog that 1/2 inch conduit. And you can, for the outside, you can use any screen. I use a very fine screen for the inside because there's mites and stuff that I still get that I don't want getting out. This is the 1-inch pipe screen that I purchased on Amazon, and the link will be below. And I just set that right into there like that. You could, it just sets nicely right inside that PVC elbow. And this is how I keep the worms from clogging up that 1/2 inch hole. You cannot have them clogging that 1/2 inch conduit, because if they do, you're going to have a massive die out, and this is not fun. I want you to look at my other invention there, or thought, to keep the worms inside the bucket, and they got around that Coke bottle, if you can believe that. I've had a few massive die outs when I first started learning this vermiculture process. It doesn't happen, it can be prevented, and we'll be talking more about that in upcoming videos. So as far as the drainage system here, now we have a 1/2 inch T PVC that a bottle is attached with about an inch conduit that the bottle stays on the bottom, and I put a screen inside that one as well to keep the fruit flies from getting inside there and messing around with the bottom of the bucket or getting in through the bucket that way. And I also make a cap sometimes that comes off and on the, so I could take it off and on, make it interchangeable. See, there's a little cap that I use, and that you can do as well. So you could put a screen in there, or you could make a little cap. And that's basically it. And then you put the sock on top of that. Sometimes I have a sock, sometimes I don't. I like to have it for some reason, so I add a sock on there as well. So that's basically it, folks. This is the Eve Vermenting container build. And I can't wait to see if other people start to do this and experiment with the concept. These are basically the parts that I use in upcoming videos. I'll show you how I make my aeration tube. It's very simple. It's just 2 bottles that are glued together with a hot gun. And we'll talk more about that. And in the end, you get worm castings. I think you get it faster than any residential vermiculture farm. I think you get it faster, and I think you can get them to consume more compost. Okay, that's all I have for now here. This has been the Eve Growing Concept Vermenting Container Build. I hope you liked it. Subscribe if you like, and let us grow up together. Have a good holiday, folks. Over and out.